Hello and welcome back, everyone. I'm Lauren Young of Series 61, and this is the Ascendus Executive Hour. Today's podcast is 4 ways to become more influential at work, and we are fortunate enough to have the managing partner of Upsurge Advisors with us today, Nicole DeFalco. Welcome, Nicole.
Hey, Lauren.
So we have a great deal of content to get through today. I'm ready to jump in if you are.
Yeah, that sounds great. Let's do it.
All right, perfect. So, Nicole, I've known you for a long time, and I know that you are obsessed with influence. And you know I mean that in a very good way. But could you share with our audience what fascinates you about influence?
You know, there's no need to qualify obsessed. It's totally true. So I have been curious about influence. I want to say I think I can take it all the way back to the 7th grade. And I just kept trying to figure out why we were following along with some kids, but no one was following me. So throughout school and I know, it's the truth, right? So throughout school and into corporate life, I just always wondered, what made some people so much more influential than others. And I just really wanted to figure that out, so that I would know what I needed to do to be more influential.
Definitely. So in your opinion, why is influence so important?
Well, I think actually I'm going to lean not on my own opinion, but on that of Harry Kramer. He is an NU Kellogg professor of management and strategy. He's got a great book, but he defines leadership as the ability to influence others. So according to him, leadership is words, actions, and role modeling to inspire and motivate others to pursue what matters most. So influence is important because essentially you can't lead without it. Basically, according to Harry, influence is leadership, and I agree with that completely.
Absolutely. So now let's go back to this quest that you have to figure out why some people are more influential than others. You said what you were looking for was why some people are more effective leaders than others. So what did you find out?
Yeah, so I guess really then, right, the real question was, I wanted to be more influential, but I guess ultimately what I wanted was how do I become a great leader? And so what I found out through the research that I did and just watching really successful people was that the difference between kind of most of us who have some amount of influence and those who are highly influential comes down to 3 things, and that's CIT.
CIT. Okay, what does that stand for, or are you going to keep us in suspense?
A little suspense keeps people listening, right? So we just bought 5 seconds more attention. Okay, so I'll go through it. So finally, drum roll, please. So C. So this is, again, most of us have a sphere of influence, and then there are people who are crazy influential, right? So what does it take to be that highly influential person? So the first thing is it was a matter of choice. That's what the C stands for. Highly influential people make this choice to live and work differently. They've decided that whatever it is that, they decided what they can accomplish by being highly influential, it's worth it, right? It's worth adapting your behaviors and maintaining certain practices and conducting themselves in certain ways, right? So that the price that you pay in terms of the change in your work style is definitely worth the price for them, and they made that choice. So the I is for intent. So if you think about Harry's definition of leadership, the point is influencing people to pursue what matters most. So the intent is focused on a greater good. So it's not to influence others to serve the leader's needs. It's influencing people to contribute to a cause or the organization, the community, the team, whatever matters most. And then finally there's the T, and T stands for trust. Highly influential people are fanatics about doing and saying only what builds trust, and they avoid trust busters like they were the plague. Trust is foundational. People are just not motivated or inspired by those they do not trust first, right? You have to have it in order to lead.
Very true. Okay, so CIT, that was 3 things that you could do to become more influential, but we promised 4. What's number 4?
Yeah. See, we haven't even gotten to the four things yet. That's the cool
Oh.
part. So, yeah, CIT is like step zero. It's the groundwork. So once a person commits to becoming more influential, then you get into the four practices that they weave into their everyday interactions to proactively build and deepen stakeholder relationships. So before I get to those, though, I want you and the listeners just to pause for a moment and consider this. What might you accomplish if you were more influential at work? Because really the answer to that question has to serve a purpose beyond your own ego or self-promotion, right? Remember, intent. And it has to be worth it for you to adjust your work style to be like that of other highly influential people, right? That's the C. So if you haven't made the choice and you don't have that right intent, other people aren't going to follow you, or they won't for long. And then you also won't stick to the four practices. So just giving you guys a moment, just think about it. Think of all that you could accomplish if you had more influence. Got it?
Okay, I got it.
You got something in mind? Okay, great. All right, so the first practice then, now we'll go to the four things, right? Okay, so the first practice is to be a connector, to build networking into your routine.
Okay, so connectors, those are those influential people. So right now I'm envisioning someone who's well-dressed, who shakes a lot of hands, and they'll gather a lot of business cards, and they're sipping on a glass of wine, eating fancy crackers at like a local venue. Is that an accurate description?
Yeah, no, that's a collector, a business card collector. We're talking about a connector. So I know that's like a common thing, right? People go, oh, networking, and they think of, like old cheese and bad crackers, right? But it's not really about schmoozing and racking up the favor bank. That's not what networking is. We're talking about this inherently human act of making and connecting with people, really making friends. I mean, that, it's crazy that we have to point that out. Like a daily practice in your life or a regular practice should be making friends. But we just get so busy, right? So, and we lose track. So when you think of networking, think about asking thoughtful, curious questions, listening, taking an interest, getting to know people, building relationships, and then selflessly considering how you can serve others. So go back to intent, right? That's at the heart of our ability to influence. And our intent determines why and how we network and if we're going to be successful. So, the person that you described is somebody who's going into a meeting and saying, what can I get? And what I want to challenge people is that highly influential people walk into a networking opportunity and they say, what can I give?
For sure. I personally enjoy networking, but I know it can be very time consuming.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you think of it as like having to go to a local event after a full 12-hour day, right, of working. So it doesn't have to be. So I'm going to give you an example. Say you're waiting for a meeting to begin, right? And instead of being head down, checking your email on your phone or wandering aimlessly through Facebook, think about chatting with the people around you, asking questions to learn more about their world, and listening for opportunities to connect them to people, resources, ideas, information, and then following up. That's the key thing. Think about it. You're sitting there anyway, right? And you're waiting for, you've got to be in the meeting. It's running late or whatever, and you have this time. Instead of thinking, oh, good, I'll catch up on email, think, look around, who can I connect with and what relationships can I build?
I agree. It requires a mindset shift, and I think it can be done. But I feel like if you go into these situations looking for opportunities and you want to get to know people better and really connect with them, it'll become natural for you to start engaging and asking questions.
Yeah,
okay, great.
Exactly.
What is your second practice?
Okay. So the second practice is about how you think. So we talked about a mindset. This is a little bit different. Influencers are collaborators. They've checked their ego at the door, and so they're not so concerned with being right. See, if I'm worried about being right all the time, then someone else is going to be wrong all the time, right? And that is actually, you're defending your ideas. It's usually at the expense of someone else. So that kind of right or wrong proposition, right, is very divisive. So influential people practice what I actually picked this up from the Rotman School. It's called integrative thinking. And it's this concept and tools that it's in a book by Roger Martin called The Opposable Mind, Winning Through Integrative Thinking. So it's this idea of holding two opposable ideas in your mind to synthesize new and superior ideas.
So isn't that just a fancy way of saying compromise?
You'd think, right? No, it's actually not. Okay, I'll give you an example, right? So here we go. So right, in compromise, you end up with the good things and the bad things from two options, right? So I'll give you an example. You want to go out to dinner and your husband wants to go to a movie. So you compromise by ordering takeout and watching a movie at home. So neither of you is particularly happy, right? You know, you sort of got the best and the worst of all those options. Integrative thinking would go deeper to cull out the best from both sides, but eliminate the negatives. So if you were using integrative thinking on the dinner movie scenario, you end up at like an iPic theater, right, where you're eating out in the theater, you know, so your husband gets to see that first one movie in IMAX, right, and you actually get, you know, that I'm eating out kind of feel, right? So that's an example of integrative thinking.
Got it. And I love iPic, so that would work for me. So that's a perfect example, and I really think that clarifies what you mean when you say integrative thinking. So how do we get good at holding two opposing thoughts in our head?
Right? Most of us can barely hold one thought in our head for a amount of time. So there are lots of good ways to do this. One of my favorites is okay, so there are a lot of good things. Like you can read biographies and there's all these things. I just love this one because you just adjust the questions you ask when you're faced with opposing ideas, right? So non-influential people, again, are really more about, you know, how do I get my idea across? How do I get them to understand me? Whereas influential people are kind of more collaborative anyway, right? They're sort of looking for a way to engage. So if you just shift the questions, like, what are the causal relationships at work here? Or what are the implied trade-offs? You know, can we think about this differently to get a new option we hadn't considered yet? So they're sort of willing to let go, right, of their position and sort of encourage the other person, like maybe you need to like let go a little of yours, and between the two of us we can come up with something that's even better. So I think it's just even in the questions that you ask is a great way to start.
So I really like this. So far, we're not really adding any time to our day because we already have busy schedules. It's almost like we're thinking and acting differently as we go about our regular days. So this is great. All right.
Yeah.
What's the third practice?
Okay. So going along that same vein, right, like how do you make the most of your time, right, and not add in more? The third practice is keeping your eyes and ears open for what we call structural holes.
Okay, so it's like where Domino's is going around and filling potholes across the country?
That commercial cracks me up. Actually,
right?
Yeah, that's a really good example. So think about it. Like apparently we have a syndrome of like ruined pizzas, you know, because people are driving in potholes everywhere. It's an epidemic, right? So who fixes potholes, right? It's normally municipalities, but you know, they are on their own schedule, right? So they're not sitting there going, you know what, this road needs to go first because it's a direct line between that neighborhood and the Domino's, right? Like that's not how the municipality makes its decision. So Domino's sort of figured out a really sketchy way, right? Like they sort of came in and said, okay, we'll fill the potholes, and it actually took me a while to consider that this was a value. I thought it was just like typical Pizza Hut, Domino's battle. But in a way, if you think about it, it's actually extremely altruistic because if Domino's is augmenting the municipality's job, right, by filling in potholes, they're actually making the road safer for everybody, those with pizzas and those without. So if you think about it, that's really what structural holes is kind of about. It's keeping your eyes and ears open for these disconnects. Usually in an organization, it's disconnects between people and groups. You're looking for gaps or the obstacles that are preventing the flow of resources and information. And now non-influential people or just average influential people sort of say, I have my sphere of influence and I also have my sphere of responsibility. So there's a little bit of like, that's not my job over there, right? So Domino's very easily could have said, yeah, that's a clever marketing thing, but filling in potholes, not my job, right? But then you start to look at it and you're like, well, you know, it's sort of a marketing thing, right? But I also, we're doing something good in our communities, right? We're giving back to the community. So instead of saying not my job, you sort of ask, how might we use our time, talent, and resources to close the gap? So I'll give you an example from work. I used to work years ago at a sales consulting firm. So we had one team responsible for training the customers on the company's methodology. My team was building software for the customers to use after they were trained on the methodology. And the sales force was actually supposed to be selling both the training and the technology. And there was just this huge disconnect between the three groups. And it totally was not part of my job description, but I took the initiative to serve as a liaison between the software developers, the trainers, and the salespeople. And it worked out so well, the company created an official position, and I got promoted to be the VP of Training and Technology. And I didn't do it. Yeah, it was really cool, like big career bonus, right? But that wasn't what I set out to do. Like, that was not on the horizon anywhere. It just needed to get done. So I just stepped in and I did it. Now, the outcome of that, or a byproduct, was I increased my influence. I became more influential in the organization, first informally, and then it did become formal with the new position. So I was really able to lead change that benefited the company, and most importantly, really benefited the customer. And that was what my main goal was.
So, Nicole, it's interesting to hear how you've used these methods in your own career, and you've given me a newfound respect for that Domino's Road Paving campaign.
There you go.
Okay. What's the fourth and final practice?
Okay. So the fourth practice is both mindset and skill-based, and it has to do with how you interact and communicate with others. So the idea is to adopt a seek first to understand before trying to be understood mindset. You want to take a genuine interest in others, learn about their world, walk a mile in their shoes, and stop trying to sell people on your ideas and get them to understand things from your point of view. So instead, you're asking questions and listening and trying to see the world as they see it. Having that understanding of other people's worlds then allows you to position ideas and tailor messages so that they're compelling and they're well received. And then you're much more persuasive, which ultimately means it's easier to motivate and inspire others to pursue what matters, which is the reason for becoming more influential.
Okay. So this one sounds like it requires some training to become a little bit more comfortable with this technique. Would you agree?
I do. I agree with you completely. This one is definitely one where you need to practice. I think most of us lead from a telling point of view, right? We sort of lead from this, if I could only get you to understand, right? Like if you only got it from my world. And so it takes discipline in terms of the mindset to shift and say, wait a minute. Let me seek first to understand. Let me find out what's happening in their world first. And then how you interact definitely takes a little bit of training. We have a workshop called Triumph, and it introduces these great techniques for positive persuasion, and it does provide a lot of opportunities for leaders to practice. We like to create these safe but challenging environments. But that said, there is a strategy that I recommend people try immediately. So even if they can't get to one of our Triumph workshops, I'm going to give them one nugget that they can use, and we call that LOLA. So everything has these great, sticky ways to remember, right? CIT, and now you have LOLA. And we'll meet Lola. So LOLA is, the first L is lead in, then it's open-ended question, listen, and affirm. So when you're interacting with people throughout your day, again, this is one where you don't have to, it's not more time than you're normally taking. It's just in your interactions anyway. You use LOLA, and it helps you focus on asking and listening more than telling. So it's a posture or a conversation cadence that builds trust, which ultimately increases influence. So I have a question for you. Will you come along with me on a little role play demonstration?
Oh, sure. This will be fun.
Okay, cool. Awesome. You're always willing, right? Willing?
Yeah.
Whatever I throw your way, you're like, yeah, bring it. Okay. So let's assume, here's the setup. Let's assume that I'm talking to you about a potential project, Okay, so whether we're initiating a conversation or responding to the other person, the cadence always begins with a lead-in, and that sets the context and lets the other person know where the discussion is heading. And then it sort of opens the door for that open-ended question to engage the person. And the goal is to get this like mutual understanding of the problem, the opportunity, or the situation. Okay, so here we go. I'm gonna start with you, Lauren.
Okay.
You're in marketing. That's such a broad term. It means different things to different people. Now, I don't want to assume we're talking about the same thing. So what does marketing mean at Theory 61?
Okay. Our mission and our marketing focus is related to customer retention and behavior analytics. So we study the external trends that influence why customers buy, and then we decipher the meanings of these trends for organizations.
Okay, so now I'm going to paraphrase what I heard you say. And what that does is it affirms I was listening, and it is also a check for clarification. So you can use, and in this example, I'm going to use my affirmation as the lead into my next question. So I say to you, so if we're struggling to earn repeat business with customers, you can help us understand what's impacting the buying decision. What does that look like? What's the output of that?
Yes, that's correct. That's exactly how we would help in that situation. So once we figure out what's affecting your buyer's decisions, we would produce a customer-centric retention strategy that you can implement immediately.
Okay, and then the cadence would continue. I'd affirm what you said, and that would lead into my next question. So make sense so far?
It does, yeah, perfect.
Okay, you good to demonstrate one more?
Sure.
Okay, all right, so this time it's going to require some acting. All right. I need you to be angry or annoyed. So I know that doesn't happen much in your life. In fact, I can't think in all the years I've known you of you actually ever having an annoyed tone. But
no.
bring your best improv to this one. All right. So you're going to be complaining or giving feedback about a frustrating situation. Okay. So go ahead. You open with me.
I'm going to try my best. Okay.
Oh, I know. So give it a shot here.
Let me go through maybe a typical corporate solution or situation. How about, Nicole, I am so aggravated. The execs are demanding that we roll out this new software to 7 more regions, but my staff is barely able to complete the current rollout to just 1 region. I need more headcount.
Lauren, it certainly sounds like a really frustrating situation. I want to help. Let me ask you a few questions just to get a clear understanding of all the factors at play, and then we can work together to come up with options for you and your team. Tell me about the approach that you've taken so far in the current rollout.
Oh, I like that. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
So specifically, I like how you did not agree or disagree with that request for more headcount, but what you did was you moved me away from that. Very expertly. So I can see where this will become more of a collaborative discussion about that situation versus you trying to sell me on more headcount and then you delicately or not so delicately saying no to that request.
Right. Exactly. And I hear that a lot. I get a lot of other consultants who are like, oh, how do you say no? I'm like, you don't. You really don't. I mean, there's sometimes where you flat out have to say no, but most of the time, again, that's you lose, I win, right? I mean, that's an imbalance in the conversation, whereas this, as you said, is let's just move off that option for a second. I'm not ignoring it. It might actually come down to what we need to do, but I don't know the full situation. So for me, just to think that more headcount could actually make things worse for you, right? Because now you've got to slow down and train the headcount, right? So depending on who we bring in, right? So there are all these things that could go on. So we really have to get this good definition of what the situation is, and then we can explore solutions together. So ultimately, it's much more creative and collaborative. We're using integrative thinking. We could use design thinking if we wanted to around the solutions themselves, right? So the idea is that whatever we come up with, we're both going to be bought into it, and we will have worked on it together, which furthers our relationship together.
Well, as usual, this has been very insightful and practical. I could apply this today in the next couple of meetings that I have. So
good, yeah. Next phone call, use Lola.
For sure. So how can listeners learn more about these skills and practices from you?
Yeah, you know what? Well, first of all, again, thank you so much for taking the time to talk through this with me and for role playing. I love the richness of what drives human behavior. So I love the theory behind all this stuff, but I'm also this huge pragmatist. So when you're like, hey, I can use this, right away, like that just makes my pragmatic heart sing, right? That's just the best part of it. So I always want people to have specific steps to take to put, the theory to work. So there are a couple of things. We have a self-directed learning experience. We have a set of modules that are available on the Ascendus Leadership Academy. So people can subscribe to the site and they can get access to the learning, not only from us, but there's also these fabulous other experts out there. So it's really good leadership development overall. And then we do have our Cultivating Business Relationships learning experiences. And these are, workshops and coaching. We deliver it in person. We deliver it virtually. In fact, you and I were just talking about the fact that I was on the line at 6 in the morning with a group in India doing training with them. So but so if people want to explore what that might look like to have a customized Cultivating Business Relationships workshop for their organization or their team, they can reach me at Nicole@upsurgeadvisors.com. They could go to our website, upsurgeadvisors.com, and click on Contact Us. That's another way to go. It's nice and easy, and they get to see the website. We are also out on Twitter and Facebook at Upsurge Advisors. Also, in case they're thinking, oh, well, we don't want to do anything custom, but we would love to bring this in-house anyway. Anybody who wants to, we have what we call a DIY, the do-it-yourself version of it out there. It's on sale on the website. It's all of the materials. It's our leader guides and participant materials. It's everything that you need. It's like over 20 hours worth of learning experiences just to download, purchase, download, and use at will. So that's out there too.
That's wonderful. So no excuse. You can do the do-it-yourself version. You can have a fully facilitator-led session, whatever you prefer. It's out there.
Yeah, and the self-directed on the Ascendus Leadership Academy. That's a great way to get started too.
Absolutely. Well, once again, thank you, Nicole. This wraps this edition of the Ascendus Executive Hour. And on behalf of the entire Ascendus team, I'd like to say thanks one more time to Nicole DeFalco for your insight and time today. Always a pleasure. And for our listeners, I hope this information has proved to be valuable to you. And if you haven't already, make sure you go visit the Ascendus Leadership Academy online at ascendusacademy.com. Go ahead and sign up for an account and begin your new path for leadership. Take care, and we'll chat with you again soon on the next Ascendus Executive Hour.